secretaries that are in the house right now. If you are here, please feel free to let us know you're here in the chat. Our legislative committee are the folks that you see present. Our president, Imani Bro-Smith, our first vice president and chair, Eric Harris. I am the co-chair, Georgia Richardson. Joe Fernandez is a member, Stephanie Christmas, and our moderator and member of our committee also, Shaniqua Badger. You'll be hearing from her a little later. And did I say Maureen Caldwell already? Maureen Caldwell-Murr. She's also on our committee here. So thank all of you for your dedication. We're meeting on a regular basis so that we can bring valuable information to our membership and to our community. It's important for us to know our representatives, get those who want to represent us and hear what they have to say. And we've provided this platform for that purpose. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce, if Willie Wilcox is in the house. I don't know that he would he be able to do that from the webinar perspective?
I don't see him here.
Okay, so we're going to ask our first vice president and chair of our legislative committee, Eric Harris, to just open us up in prayer, please.
Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to gather today. Thank you for allowing our candidate, one of the candidates, Allyssa Victory, to come share with us. Please bless all those attending, and may our plans come to fruition. And thank you, and continue to bless us in our city. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. So we're going to just jump right in here. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our illustrious president, Imani Bro-Smith, to say a few words. And following Imani will be our moderator, Shaniqua Badger. So Shaniqua, feel free to jump right in when Imani's all done with everything. And we want to get started, and hopefully everyone in attendance will enjoy this and walk away a little more knowledgeable about our guest, Allyssa. Allyssa, is it pronounced Allyssa? Allyssa?
Allyssa, thank you for asking.
Allyssa.
You can also just say Victory if that's easier.
We just call you Victory. All right. All right, Imani.
Thank you so much. Hey, good evening, everyone. We want to thank you for coming and spending an hour with us today. But before we get to the conversation and dialogue on why you're here, I want to share with you about our organization, so you know just a bit about who we are and why we are putting on this series for you and why we think that it's really important. So our organization, Associated Real Property Brokers, is the Oakland chapter of NARAB. They are the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and we are a professional trade organization that is principally made up of African American and also other minority real estate professionals. And we call ourselves Realtists. So a bit about our organization and its history. So we are getting ready to celebrate 75 years as an organization. So 1947 is when we were founded. We are an equal opportunity and civil rights advocacy organization geared to help promote African American real estate professionals, consumers, and our community. We are all about democracy and housing, and we're all about the promoting of fair housing and also the promotion of Black home ownership. And so annually, our national leg produces a report called the Sheba Report. And it is some really pertinent, really interesting information. And so if you can, I will also put it in the chat for you all, but go ahead and scan it, take a look at it. Like I said, just really, really pertinent information, and really gets to the root of why our organization was needed to be created and has spent 75 years on the grounds fighting for democracy and housing. So just a few of our national policy recommendations that we have on a national level to increase Black home ownership. One of them is the creation of a national restorative justice down payment assistance program. And just briefly, one of the barriers, right, for a lot of us, especially people of color, is the savings, having the down payment, having the funds to actually purchase this asset that is used to build wealth. Another one is to reform and standardize the payment calculations for student loans and mortgages. Another thing, right, is as people of color, we tend to have higher debt when we go to school. And unfortunately, what happens is that later on, when we are seeking to become homeowners, that is something that can get in the way. And lastly is the elimination of the loan level price adjustments. Essentially, that is where people who have lower credit scores, have lower savings, have to still pay more, right, to entertain home ownership. So as an organization, we are doing a lot. We are very effective in making sure that we are staying in front of policy. So this is our website. I suggest you take a look and go to narab.com, find out more about our organization. We are on the ground in 90 chapters in the US, 9 in California. So wherever you have someone who is eager to get into home ownership and get more information, please make sure that you connect them and let them know about this organization and who the realtors are. So I encourage you all to stay connected. We are on all social media platforms. We have Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, which this recording will be posted to, and also LinkedIn. So please tap in with us and please give feedback, and we thank you for joining us. And I am now going to pass the mic back to Ms. Oh, excuse me, am I passing it back to you, Ms. Georgia? Or are we getting straight to the meat?
Straight to your moderator.
Okay, got you. So I want to now bring in our moderator and our Realtors champion in our chapter, Ms. Shaniqua Badger.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to first and foremost say, many of you know me as the team lead of the Badger Real Estate Group, but tonight I am your moderator. Good evening. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping if I can. We always got to do a little housekeeping to keep our house a little clean while we do this. And because we're going to have a lot of ground to cover in this. First and foremost, panelists, I'm going to ask that all of you remove your hot mics. If any of your mics are hot, please put them on mute. You all get to be on silent until the Q&A as well. And also just to let you all know that we will be opening up Q&A towards the end of the session of the conversation. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section down below of the Zoom webinar. So I think we're ready to get started. Allyssa, are you ready?
Yes, I am, and so good to see you again.
Yes, good evening. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I can't believe it's already July, but we talked about a bit. We had a holiday weekend and a lot of activity in the city of Oakland, and still continuing every night where I'm at. So I'm just very happy to be here with you all again. It's one of my favorite organizations, and y'all hosted our very first candidates forum that I participated in. So very excited to be here to talk with you all one-on-one, to answer your questions and just have a real discussion about the future of Oakland.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that we've done this intentionally so that you all get to know the candidates on a one-on-one basis. So this is more like a conversation. So it's going to be a pretty intimate connection between us. And then I'm told that I need to land the plane by 7:30. So we're going to make sure that we're timely. We want to be respectful of everyone's time, attendees, candidates, and all people in between that. So let's just jump into our first question if we can. What experience and skill set do you have that give you the confidence that you can affect change in Oakland?
Great question. If you don't know me, I'm Allyssa Victory. I am from the city. I was raised in North Oakland, Bushrod Park area to be specific. I grew up in my church doing public service with food and clothing distribution at True Vine Missionary Baptist in West Oakland. I'm a product of public schools, and my mother is a public school teacher when I was growing up. We were evicted from our home in 2007 when I was trying to finish high school, and became homeless for almost a decade. And so I've personally experienced living in every city district. I've experienced homelessness I'm now a civil rights attorney and a civil rights leader in this community and throughout the state of California. I'm the first in my family to go to college. My degree is in Black Studies and Ethnic Studies. And while I was a student, I helped to found the UC San Diego Black Resource Center when we only had 0.07 Black students who were attending the school at the time. They're like 1%, maybe 2% right now. So they've made some progress, but it was a lot to win a critical resource and a 6-figure center for a campus that, again, didn't have us there. And then I went on to become first in my family to obtain a professional degree. I have a law degree, the only practicing attorney who is a candidate in the mayor's race. And my degree is focused, concentrated in government law. Ever since I was a law student, I've been advising the city of Oakland on how our officials can do their jobs better, how they can better serve the public, how they can create innovative structures like public banking, how they can better protect workers' rights. And I currently work at the ACLU as a police practices attorney. And I advise governments throughout the Northern California region on public safety, on budgeting, police labor rights, on oversight of police and of sheriffs, and everything in between. And so I've been working from behind the scenes, helping our city, helping our commissioners, our boards do their job and serve. And I'm running to be a public servant, not a politician. I'm already representing our assembly district as a delegate to the Democratic Party. And I was elected independently without raising a single dollar, got a lot of new voters to register for the first time. And that's the same way that I'm running this campaign now, is activating every part of our city to serve every part of our city. So I am an expert in government. I've already been advising our council members, our mayor, our commission, our city attorney on how to do their jobs. And I'm ready to lead from the front.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you for allowing us to get to know you better. And I'm going to again go into a space that I think all of or most of us who sell real estate are very encouraged by, in terms of the necessity to have this conversation, because we've been having these conversations a lot. To improve minority home ownership, the average sewer lateral costs between $7,000 to $10,000, and the average sidewalk improvement is $3,000 to $5,000. Having to pay for these additional costs knocks many of our buyers out of the market. What solutions or ideas do you have to assist our minority first-time home buyers?
Thank you for the question. I'm glad that this is a group that kind of understands the nuance to an issue like sidewalk repair that other people may not think about, or a lot of homeowners don't think could be an issue. But the law is that sidewalk repair costs are supposed to be passed on to the homeowner. If the city has noticed, they are supposed to make repairs, but then they will ask for reimbursement from the homeowner. So I'm very familiar with the issue. I've hosted several house parties, and people have even asked me, for some of that free legal advice of, hey, I got this notice. I don't even understand what it means. I don't understand how to ask questions about it. I can't contact anyone at the city. But I think one, at a very basic level, we need to have more staffing within our city that is supposed to be responsive to questions, to support homeowners, to ask about things that are related to repairs of sidewalks and sewer laterals. But definitely the cost can be prohibitive to people, as you said, first-time home buyers, especially people of color and Black homeowners. When the city first rolled out its ordinance requiring folks to pay for sidewalk repairs, they had a moratorium on charging any fees. They also had a waiver process to ensure that anyone that could show it would be a hardship or could prevent them from stepping into home ownership could have that fee completely waived and have the city bear those costs. So we've already done it. We've already had no cost program. We've already had the city not charge people at all and add that extra red tape for people to step into home ownership. And we can do it again. We haven't been funding a lot of our down payment assistance programs, rental assistance programs, home buyer programs. We haven't been funding them for years. And so it's about prioritizing our public dollars for this type of assistance, especially when we know it will help us achieve equity. will achieve parity between home ownership along racial lines, along economic lines. So we have to be willing to take those steps and carve out exceptions and understand and meet our public where they're at. Again, we have to have some public education around where people can go to get resources, what this even means, and if they have questions on how to comply, they should be able to understand what that means. I also just want to give one example that the city itself kind of puts a lot of burden on individual and private owners to fix a lot of infrastructure that I think the city should be more responsible and accountable for. Even city properties that should be maintained and repaired are not done in timely fashion in many areas of the city. And the city itself has kind of a poor record keeping and administrative problem in our departments that administer sidewalk repairs. I experienced this as counsel to a labor union that has an office, a physical property in District 2 of Oakland. They got a sidewalk repair notice for a sidewalk that was not damaged. It had been damaged by the city 2 years before and then repaired completely by the city. So I looked at the photo that they sent that was 3 years old and asking for our union hall to pay a high fee, and had sent those notices to all the business owners on the block without basic legal counsel and someone who could call the city and say, this is outdated, and I can show you a photo right now. They started, oh, that's our mistake. We're gonna send you notice that this was an error. But other people were prepared to pay that charge when it was the city's own technical error. So I think there's issues on just how we've been administering it, how we've even been record keeping, how responsive or lack of response we've been to people who need assistance, who are trying to get clarity and correction. And at the bottom line, we need to eliminate the fees and have a waiver program, and that's through funding it as a priority.
I really appreciate you emphasizing prioritizing public dollars. Because we've asked this question before to candidates that are running and seated city council people, and it's very interesting to hear their responses around the sidewalk ordinances or sewer lateral. Some are like, I think it's great. Some are like, we want our streets to look like Pleasanton. So it's very interesting to hear the feedback, but I can honestly tell you that I think that what we haven't heard is implementing no-cost programs or finding a real resolution where the city, it works in tandem with buyers and sellers. So I appreciate that conversation, and we're going to continue this thing around homeownership and housing, if I may. This week, we heard some very interesting public comments around the just cause ordinance in the city. This conversation that we're going to have is really around TOPA. What is your position on the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act as it relates to tenants, homeowners, and real estate industry professionals?
Thank you for the question. TOPA, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. I spoke about it a bit at the April forum that you all hosted. I want to be clear that Oakland does not have a current proposed TOPA, and TOPA can look different in the actual substance. There was a TOPA proposed in Berkeley that's now kind of been held up by the mayor and went through several different amendments of carving out more exceptions and more clear language around requirements. San Francisco has adopted COPA, which is Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, which is only available not to tenants, but to community-based organizations, nonprofits, community land trusts to purchase residential property before it's taken off the market completely. And so, and in San Francisco, there's a specific wait period that has to be 1 year after it's been on the market and hasn't sold. So there's a lot of specifics that can be baked into it, but at a basic level, I support the principle of an opportunity to purchase, meaning a tenant first right of refusal to purchase their building and continue living in it as residential property if the owner's intent is to sell it completely and take it off the market. And I do believe that there need to always be carve-outs and exceptions, especially for owner-occupied property for small units. I think Berkeley was limiting it to, it had to be more than 5 units. So I have definitely talked with several members of this organization, of NAREP, and other housing equity organizations around how this can look. And so I think that as mayor, I would have to be willing to bring in all of you as critical stakeholders to craft the best version that makes the most sense for Oakland. Many of y'all have brought up to me the issue that even if we grant people this right of first refusal, a lot of tenants may not even have the funding or access to it to be able to purchase, and that it will still end up corporations or foreign investors may come and buy up this residential housing. So there's been gaps already identified in the concept and idea, and still we're trying to get at the overall issue of affordable housing, right? We want to preserve existing housing, and this is really one of many options to try to preserve affordable housing and rental units in our city. I think it can be done. It can be drafted in a way that makes sense for our city. There isn't a current proposal for me to say I support this specific ordinance, but I support the spirit of it and want to keep working with organizations like you and renters like myself. I am one of 2 renters that is in this race of how this will make sense and actually reach the goals that we want it to without having unintended consequences, especially in the areas of equity and removing property from people forcibly. That is not what the intent is ever to do. It's a right to purchase.
Thank you. And I think one of the, as we segue into this next space, I think that, again, there is a complementary concern, if I may use those words, between the question around homeownership, housing, and public safety. Violent crimes are up 8% from 2020 to 2022, with robberies being up 11% and burglaries being up 17%. Over that same period, how would you combat these rising numbers that impact our community?
I have a lot to say about this question. As y'all heard, I am a police practices attorney, so I deal with criminal justice every day. I meet with police chiefs, I meet with police commissions and oversight. I also deal with sheriffs and sheriff's oversight. I also meet with our district attorneys and our public defenders, folks who are kind of on the accountability side of once a crime has already happened and people are in our criminal justice system. I will say that public safety requires our public to be safe, and that housing is a part of our public being safe, right? Employment and equal opportunity is a part of our public being safe. We've been in a pandemic for over 2 years now. We've seen disparate unemployment and businesses closing. When our public is in crisis, we will see crime go up. And so absolutely, housing and other quality of life aspects are going to be always connected to crimes and the types of crimes. But this campaign is also based on facts and not fear. That I don't want to be pushing a lock 'em up attitude, because that has never, ever in history served Black folks, right? We're still disproportionately the people who are arrested, who are detained, who are incarcerated, who are held without bail simply because we are poor. I teach inside of San Quentin prison and can tell you all that we are there and we're not out here, right? So I don't want to just reproduce some of the old systems, because California is the #1 incarcerator in the world. So simply investing and over-investing in our carceral solutions has not been a solution. And it's certainly not worked for Black communities, for Black families, or for Black unhoused folks. Our solutions right now to our unhoused population, which is 70% Black in a city that is 20% Black, is criminalization. It is redlining of where they can be and using police and other law enforcement to enforce those types of rules instead of housing services or housing support. And so we already have overinvestments in those carceral systems. So I want to invest in root causes of violence and root causes of crime. Again, things like jobs or housing that cause people to be lacking, that cause folks to steal. When we see teenagers stealing 500 purses, they're not going to wear them themselves, they're going to sell them for money so that they can translate that to food, to gas, to things that they need. And we know that gas and all these other things are getting even more expensive. Our minimum wage right now is $15. So again, public safety requires that our public is safe, that they have access to resources, to jobs, to housing, things that will keep them safe and also prevent them from wanting to engage in harm or violence against our neighbors. And I'm not sure where the specific numbers are from, but at the most recent presentation from OPD to our city council on 6/14 and 6/21, they presented that there's been overall 22% reduction in violent crimes, while there has been an increase in robberies and burglaries, which are not classified as violent. So we also have to be clear on what the problems are. If there are things like robberies and thefts, people stealing items, again, there's a lack of us investing in that at the front end as a public agency, as a city, where we know that people are in crisis and they're disparately folks who are Black, who look like me, and working class peoples who are dealing with unhousing and who are dealing with joblessness and who are being funneled into our criminal system. So I want to invest in people at the front end. I want to increase investments in our Department of Violence Prevention. I also want our own law enforcement to be engaging in constitutional policing. Again, we can't have public safety if our own public safety department is in crisis. And right now that's true at our city level, entering our 19th year of our police department being in federal monitoring for excessive use of force and racial profiling against Black Oaklanders. 19 years, right? That's a whole generation of being under federal oversight of our police who cannot focus on their policing because of all these extra layers. Even our county jails, we have elected a new sheriff who starts January, but our sheriff has been under Department of Justice investigation and resulted in a 15-month federal oversight of our county jails for violating people's constitutional rights, people's rights to healthcare during a pandemic. Right, so that is the system that we have and that we've been funneling money and people into that is not as effective and certainly not cost effective. So we have to have holistic solutions that are about stopping violence at the root.
Now, I'm going back to my notes because I want to ask a supplementary question to that question, if I may. I heard you say that one of your roles is public safety and oversight of the police. Is there a happy balance between those two?
I absolutely think so. I think a lot of what the federal monitoring has been doing for 19 years kind of sets a template for what our police commission is doing. And our police commission is actually a model statewide and even nationally for effective oversight, for a real partnership. I've worked with our police commission and our chief of police on revising our use of force policy. And so there is already a very strong relationship between our actual law enforcement agency and the oversight commission that Oakland has made stronger over the years and is a model. And so in many ways, we kind of have the contradiction that our department has been a model for unconstitutional policing and one of the longest settlements ever, but also for gaining oversight and community empowerment and community partnership. And so I do believe that we're on the right track. I believe that our new chief of police really wants to gain that full compliance and get us out of federal oversight. And I think with someone who has almost 50% of our city dollars, our city budget, they absolutely should always have oversight and accountability. And that should be at the state level as well as our local city level.
So I have one more question, and then I want everybody to be prepared to start funneling their questions into the Q&A section of our Zoom so we can open it up formally for Q&A. I do believe that we have a few questions that may have been sent in ahead of time, but if not, we'll focus on the questions that are coming in the Q&A section. So before we open up the floor to what we call our city, we're going to finish with this last question. What steps do you plan to take to create and sustain a beautiful, clean, green, litter-free Oakland?
I mean, that's the goal, right? I think almost every mayor before me has ran on, fixing the potholes, picking up the trash. Like in 4 years, I don't want to still be promising that. I don't want to still be talking about it or studying how many potholes and how many illegal dumping sites we have. I want us to solve that. Trash pickup and cleanliness, sanitation is a really basic public service. And it's one that we don't actually perform as a city. The city of Berkeley, their trash, their recycling is picked up by the Department of Sanitation, city workers, city trucks, city control. The city of Oakland is under contract with Waste Management for our trash and California Waste Solutions for our recycling. And those contracts make it hard for us to control the actual quality of service and be malleable if we have, a influx of trash or dumping in a certain area and need to increase service there. We've instead tried criminalization. We've installed cameras. There's huge banners in a lot of the dumping sites. I used to live on 88th and G right by the railroad tracks, where a lot of dumping and a lot of the chop shops have burnt out cars or just stacks of tires. And they have banners there from the sheriff, the DA, and the county saying, we're watching you and you'll be prosecuted for dumping. That prosecution requires a lot of money, 5-6 figures to run cameras, to have people review that data and then go after people who are dumping. And it still doesn't clean up our streets, right? Prosecuting folks, putting up signs, doesn't clean up our streets. People want clean streets. We need sanitary streets, and we don't have public control. Just last year, we had a settlement with California Waste Solutions for overcharging and underserving our residents. That's what the resolution looks like. We can sue them. Some people might get some money or reimbursement back, but it still doesn't clean up our trash. All right, so I want to deliver high quality public services. That means staffing our public departments, having a public department of sanitation as our city used to, being able to change and to shift and provide higher services to higher needs areas, to have a dumpster if we know there's illegal dumping. There's many roads and streets and whole areas, whole parks that don't have trash cans, right? They don't have a place for people to be affirmative and to be clean. And so if we want people to behave differently, our city has to as well. I'm running on a red, black, and green New Deal as part of my climate policy, and a policy about really having a city infrastructure that is people-centered, that is walkable, that you can have safe non-car travel. We've had several pedestrians and cyclists killed by drivers in this last month alone, right? We don't have safe city infrastructure for us to live in, for our children to play in, for us to get to work on public transit, again, for us to enjoy our parks. There's not a lot of access to our green spaces. I think that's why everyone fights about Lake Merritt, because they don't know how to get to the shoreline, or they don't know how to get to the Redwood Heights and go hiking up there. And so there has to be expanded access to green spaces, to public transit. There has to be control over our public services to deliver high quality throughout our city. And trash is one of the most fundamental that we have not been doing well for decades. But again, I'm the only attorney in this race, the only one who knows how to negotiate contracts, who knows how to get us out of bad contracts and contracts where people are not meeting the standard that our city needs to function. And so those are some of the different tenets of how I want and how I will lead the city to be clean, to be beautified, and to be maintained that way throughout the next 4 years under my leadership. And part of our green principles, again, is red, black, and green. Not just let's be climate friendly, but let's be equity friendly. And know that there's so many communities that are already more toxic, that already have higher rates of asthma and other health issues, but also less access to things like food or clean water that we have to address when we're implementing that access to green space or cleaning up neighborhoods. Because again, some of them my whole life have been trashed and been divested with no response, with no community cleanup or assistance.
Well, I believe we have gotten through my set of questions. Now, this is where it gets fun, because we open it up to the community. We allow you all who are in the chat. We see some of your comments coming in, and we have some people that are part of the Q&A that have entered in their questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to ask my peers in the legislative committee, Georgia and Joe, if you could give me some assistance in running down the questions, I should say.
Of course. And Allyssa, thank you very much again. And I want to apologize because I was pronouncing your name incorrectly. So thank you for clarifying that. And I'm going to ask, this is a question from our audience. It's from Jonisha Smith. Her question is, what is your experience with planning and permitting in the city of Oakland? And what do you propose to help ease this process for Oakland property owners to make home improvements and renovations?
Thank you for the question. Again, planning and permitting is part of our city departments. We also have a city planning commission that helps kind of set the regulations and requirements for the process. I think that all of these can be done more efficiently, more effectively with our residents in mind. Again, the mayor is a strong mayor system in our city. That's different from other cities where they might rotate among council members. The mayor controls our city administrator, who is in charge of every city department. And all those departments are serving us. So there is a planning department. So my experience with pretty much every city department is that it moves slow. If there's a phone number and email, you're lucky if you're going to get a response, that you're going to have to call around maybe to 5, 10 different numbers to just talk to a live person who can direct you to someone who can actually respond. That they often, have archaic kind of records keeping. And this is not a slight towards our city staff, but the fact that we have such high vacancies throughout every city department, that we do not have investment in our city staff, in our public services, and that results in a delivery of low quality services, low response services. And that is true with our planning and permitting department. I believe it is very slow, that it also is not very accessible, like language access, just anything if people have questions. Again, having more affirmative presentations and public education on if this is a requirement and this is stopping people from improving housing or building more housing or getting ADUs permitted, like that is slowing down our overall push to create more housing units, more rental units, and more affordable housing. Right? So everything cannot continue to move so slow. Like we're in 2022, right? We need to be taking more advantage of even technology and being able to respond, have more information available, have recorded trainings available, have real access to meet people where they're at instead of them having to find and shoot around in the dark to figure out who is the right person to contact, what's the right deadline, what's the right paperwork to submit. So I think that overall, we're operating off of a really outdated kind of form of government and the processes and the timelines. And I want to, again, deliver high quality and really effective public services that starts with increasing staffing, increasing just the overall kind of cohesion between all of our city departments, and ensuring that they're refocusing their work, their priorities on the people that they're supposed to be serving. Again, not making it hard for you to find them, but making it easy for you to get information, access, and have a response to any questions.
Thank you.
I answered.
Yes, no, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. And a follow-up from the same individual was, what is your position on the new measure that proposes implementing just cause eviction on new construction and ADUs in Oakland?
Again, I'm a renter, I'm a tenant, I support just cause. Again, if we don't have just cause, then people can be evicted with no notice for no reason at all. I think if we want to protect someone's basic stability and right to have some type of notice or a reason why they would lose their entire housing that themselves, but also their children or dependents may rely on, that just cause is kind of a really baseline to protect civil rights for people to have access to housing. I think ADUs, though, I think we're going to see. I know that there may need to be amendments or changes to how it's going to operate based on the types of ADUs we see built, where they're going to be built. I know many folks who are trying to figure out the permitting process, who want to have one in their backyards or one that are directly attached to their housing and want to make sure that they have a right to remove folks in their personal space, because a lot of these are owner occupied properties as well. So I think that I support overall just cause. I know there's some issues around whether it applies to RVs and RV dwellers, especially when a lot of those folks are actually houseless and aren't simply living in an RV park, but are living in any vehicle for shelter. So I hope that answered the question, that I support just cause as an eviction requirement overall. I do think that we're going to see some of the nuance and potential issues, though, as we see more of what types of ADUs are being built and where exactly on properties they're located.
Thank you. And I believe you might have answered this question, but I want to ask, just in case there is anything you want to add to it. And that's coming from Kevin Washington, one of our members here. And he was curious if there's any current plans to address litter and non-operational vehicles in neighborhoods.
There's not. The current plan, again, is really criminalization. And they've negotiated things like the bulky pickup days, the bulky trash parties with waste management. If y'all aren't aware, I have used the service before. You can now call a number, and if you have big items like refrigerators, couches, you can get waste management to schedule an appointment to pick it up off the corner of the street. So it's not just piled up trash sitting there that's considered illegal dumping. So you can now schedule those for free with waste management. Again, that was part of us negotiating those services with this private company and with our contract that we have. So that's what's currently been done, and I still don't think it's enough. Like, if we see that there's huge corners of trash, we could affirmatively just pick it up instead of all the other resources of calling and ticketing or putting up a camera to try to catch who it could have been. Again, put the stuff in a dumpster. So that's kind of the current solution, was to just expand some of the options to drop off dumped items. They also have like the mattress drop off days, because mattresses require a special machine for you to actually process them at the dump. But many folks don't know that, and we shouldn't. And we still, they end up on the streets for many, many months, in some cases, years in some cases. So yeah, there's not a real plan that I'm seeing at this time. I believe there's a second part of the question. It was, non-operational vehicles.
Yes.
The only plan was the proposed ordinance from council to ban RVs and essentially non-operational vehicles. It's their way of, again, redlining and banning people from being homeless and trying to live in whatever shelter they can find. I understand it is a problem, but it's part of the larger issue of our city choosing to maintain homelessness and encampments instead of housing folks. But that is a current proposal from a council member, is to simply ban all RV parking and kind of inoperable vehicles on the streets. And that would be enforced with ticketing, towing, or prosecution.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for catching that last one too for me. The next question comes from Derek Barnes, and he would like to know how your approach might be different from other sitting government leaders and tenured council members with seemingly good intentions who haven't operationally had experience owning homes, managing rental housing, or running businesses, but are developing that housing policy. Keeping in mind, how do you do that without causing harm to small businesses and property owners?
Thank you for the question. I think my leadership is very different from my opponents, which do include current council members from the city, because I am not running to be a politician. I'm running to be a public servant. I'm going to continue kind of doing all the same things I've been doing. And again, I've been working behind the scenes to provide advice, to provide policy, to provide draft legislation, to provide advice on setting up departments like our Department of Workplace and Employment Standards. And I often see that our current leadership ignores that advice or sits on it and does nothing, or doesn't advance it or doesn't fund it. And so I see the core of our crises is the lack of political will to truly serve, or to radically invest, or to unapologetically talk about our equity issues. We continue to study them and to keep putting out studies around how the city itself is inequitable in the contracts we're giving to small and minority businesses, to women-owned businesses. And yet we're not radically stopping what we're doing and shifting then our matrix and our requirements and our outreach and the whole way that we're conducting business as a city if we're producing inequity ourselves, right? We know that there's 70% Black homeless folks, but we're only 20% of the city. That is by design. And so many of my opponents and our current leadership are operating under that same design. And the status quo and the design is not working for all of us. It's not working for people that look like me. Y'all mentioned some of your national platform being about student debt forgiveness. I'm in that generation that, again, is first in my family to go to college and to get a law degree, but is burdened by student debt. And I am a renter, but I'm an attorney, and I'm still trying to fight to be able to live in this city. So So I'm personally motivated by all the issues that I want to address and I've been addressing, right? I'm a civil rights attorney. I've been advising on criminal justice and policing for years, working inside of San Quentin State Prison, working as a student for prison advocacy, for prison release, and reduction of mass incarceration in college. Again, college, working on race equity issues, creating a whole structure of a Black resource center that now has a 6-figure budget and expanded its staff and its physical space. But I have been envisioning this city, what our future needs to look like the whole time with all of our residents, because I live here. I organize in so many different coalitions on the ground, professionally, but also with our council members, right? They call me as the legal expert. They call me for memos and for policy advice, right? So even if they have good intentions, they're not able to do it without experts like myself. We can skip that step now and just have an expert in public service and public governance who is advising all of your electeds and seeing them really miss the mark or fall short or not be willing to enact those things I've advised them on for years. Again, on public banking in 2015 as a student, we haven't heard anything about it since then. All right, so my style of leadership is very grassroots. You all will see me on the street, tabling outside of bars. You will see me in the bar, probably talking to people while they're drinking because they're a lot easier to get. But I am the people's candidate. I am the grassroots candidate. I am the Black woman candidate and will be the first Black woman mayor elected in the city, and am unapologetically running on equity, on racial justice and equality of opportunity. Right, and I've been doing that work. I've been on record doing that for our city, for our commissions and our boards, and I will continue to do that. And there's not a lot of cities that have a strong mayor government. And so by us consolidating so much power into our mayor's seat, if we elect a real people's champion, someone who's accountable, who is trying to open up our government and make it more accessible and transparent, then we can have a real world-class city. We can have our government work as efficient and effective as it could, with everyone talking to each other, with things responding, with websites working. Like, again, our city feels like we're back in the 90s and we're in like the tech hub of the Bay Area, of the whole state. Like, we should have some really basic things. So again, in 4 years, I don't want us to keep talking about managing encampments. I don't want us to keep talking about trying to fix the trash problem, try to fix our crime problems. I want us to have already begun those solutions. I want us to already see inroads. I want us to have shelters for our unhoused population, not be talking about cleaning up our sidewalks where they are living in tents. All right, so I'm running to be change and to see quick change within one term.
Thank you very much for your answer. And I want to take a moment here and pause and just remind everyone, since we're coming up on the time at 7:30, if you do have questions, please put it in the Q&A. That is what I'm monitoring. And if we, by some chance, we don't get to your questions, we will get those out to Allyssa. She's been great to say that she will help answer if we do run out of time. So I will try to get these questions in that I do have. This question, there's a 2-part, but I'll just stick with the first one for now. And this is from Doug Blacksher, and that is, how will you help the city of Oakland address the decline of home ownership of Black people?
Thank you for the question, Doug, and for all you do with the Black Business Roundtable. I think that you all help be architects of what that looks like, of what policy and leadership is required for us to address the disparities in Black home ownership. It includes things like assistance programs for down payments, having the waiver or no fees for sidewalk repairs and lateral sewer repairs. Again, removing all of the barriers that y'all know, that you see in your everyday jobs as realtors in this city, as Black realtors, right? That ARPB is not like any other real estate organization. It was started because so many Black folks were excluded from the real estate profession, and that exclusion was so that we could be excluded from home ownership, from having access to home buying, from people who looked like us, who could explain it to us, who came from our neighborhoods, who could help us get into housing in the neighborhoods we live in, who would give us fair pricing, who would give us, fair valuations, all of that. And so I think having groups like you as stakeholders is really critical. And I've already learned so much from your organization about just what the problems are, how they've persisted, how you organize with, again, other coalitions and your national to impact change. And so I think that there has to, again, be radical investments in the repair because our city was part of the harm. Like I said, my family lost our home as part of the foreclosure crisis where so many Black families lost their homes, their wealth. It was a capture of Black wealth. And again, it was not by accident, it was by design that has led to 70% of the homeless population being Black right now, right? That is a design to push us out of our homes, to push us out of our schools, out of our jobs, and out of this city, right? So if we want Oakland to maintain its diversity, to maintain families that look like us, for us to be able to live here, for our kids to have a future here, we have to radically repair the harms that our city was a part of, that our city condoned. Again, part of public banking is addressing the harms that we know corporate banks have caused with their lending practices and policies. And so having the city invest in those structures, those systems, so that lending and things like that can look differently as well, is all supposed to be driven by equity, by equity. And for me, that looks like putting Black people into housing, especially those of us who have lost our homes and our wealth due to the actual racist policies of the past and, to be honest, the present. Wells Fargo is being sued right now for discrimination in home lending, right? So this is a continuing problem. I'm an attorney who knows how to be at the helm of the legal fights, but who knows how to protect us from even getting harmed, from being discriminated against continually. We've had slavery era disclosure funds that are supposed to be for banks like Wells Fargo and other companies that profited off of discrimination and off of inequity of Black people. They should be paying into those funds, and those are supposed to go into housing, right? We have these funds, but we're not implementing them. We're not enforcing them. We're not administrating justice because we don't have a justice champion in the mayor's seat. And that is why I am running, so that we can understand how to do that from a city level, from a city perspective. We have a lot of philanthropy and groups that want to give and have grants and funding, but we need to see it from our city's leadership.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And kind of switching topics, but I guess in somewhat along the same lines with the city and serving the Black community, is what is your plan to address the lack of police services in the Black communities in Oakland?
Again, it's by design. And I keep saying that, I'm gonna keep saying it and keep saying, because this campaign is based on truth. But the police chief, I believe in March, basically ordered that we have more services now in District 6 and 7, which are some of the highest calls for service areas. That didn't need to be done by an ordinance, didn't need to be done by council or the mayor, simply the leadership of the chief assigning people based on where we know the calls for service are coming from. This is common sense. So I appreciate the chief for doing that, but this could have been done 5 years ago, could have been done 10 years ago, could have been done 20 years ago. And that is the difference we see when we have leaders who are willing to serve, who are willing to change what has been done in the past and what the status quo is. So that's already a step in the right direction, is simply signing people to shifts in areas that make sense based on the calls for service. But we also have a crisis, again, with our police and their oversight and all of that, but we also have police responding to so many calls that are non-criminal in any way, not even non-violent, but non-criminal. Again, homeless encampments, supervising cleanups, doing traffic enforcement or ticketing of people in abandoned cars. Those aren't criminal offenses. Those are penalties, those are notices, or just monitoring. But our city auditor since 2019 has documented and shown us and reported back to our council and our mayor that the #1 source of all of our police overtime, in addition to their overtime they already get, is spent on special events permitting. 2 years ago, our city council legislated that special events permitting needs to be shifted to our city administrator's office. That's an admin job, non-criminal task. We don't need to have our highest paid employees, police officers, doing administrative work and doing special events before they're responding to the actual crime and calls for service from our residents who are paying their salaries. Special events also are supposed to reimburse the city for that police time. We don't see either happening. Our city administrator has delayed implementing our council's legislation for over 2 years. We've not shifted police away from special events. We haven't created a special events coordinator inside the administrator's office. So we're still allowing our folks, our police, to spend their time and to spend their overtime, our public dollars, on tasks that can be done by other city employees so that they can focus on responding to the calls for service in East Oakland and those that are for violent crimes, for emergencies. Our people do not have trust in our police, but they also don't have anyone else to call. We're starting to see the pilot program of MACRO, which is the Mobile Assistance Crisis Response Oakland, which is also for nonviolent offenses, more for mental health, for people experiencing mental health crises, people who need some de-escalation or restorative justice. That's only piloted. So I want to invest more in those things. But all I'm saying is that people need to have a real deep understanding that a lot of things around shifting and seeing how our officers show up is a matter of political will. Are you willing to, one, implement what council's already legislated? Are you willing to follow what the city auditor has already recommended? Are we willing to follow what the mayor's budget advisory commission has already recommended? Are we willing to follow what Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, 9 months, 88 recommendations, has already provided to our city? From what I'm seeing, we're not willing to do those things. And Reimagining Public Safety is, again, asking to shift police away from special events permitting to focus them on violence crime. So I think that our police are not being used for the tasks they're trained for, right? They are highly trained. You have to have special post certificate to serve as law enforcement. We need to be using their skills where they're needed the most. And we need to staff up the rest of our city departments so that they can serve and respond to the other civic issues that we do have happening. So I hope I answered the question, that it's really, again, about how we're administering our departments. And we've already seen our police shift and serve and respond to more calls in Oakland just by having a chief that was willing to do that. Oh, you're on mute, Joe.
Thank you very much. No, and I do think you covered that question. Since we're almost at time and you were gracious enough to say that you're okay to go over a little bit, this is the last question I have in the Q&A. And if there's any follow-ups, like I said, we will gather those and get them to you and your team so they can be addressed. So I will ask this last question here, and that is, what is your position on the recent proposed legislation by the Oakland City Council related to tenants' rights and its impact on small rental property owners, especially during the pandemic?
I want to make sure I understand the question. You said this is the recent proposal. I'm not sure which legislation you're referencing.
You know what? They're not addressing it, so maybe we'll see if they can, if we can get a clarification on the specific legislation that they're discussing. But as that, actually, there's another really good question that came in, so I'll wait and see if we get clarification on that one. I will ask this follow-up one. How would you specifically solve the 700 plus position vacancies across the city of Oakland? I'm not sure on the number, but obviously we did hear from a previous candidate, there is a lot of open vacancies. So how would you look at addressing those?
Thank you for the question. There is high vacancies in pretty much every city department. And it has been for a while. Back in 2019, I attended a Staff Up Oakland rally for city workers. And I'm just looking back, like when my timeline, shows me like my memories, I'm like, wow, like I was talking about this issue years ago and like it's even worse now today. So again, part of it's the lack of political will and it's the lack of expediency and efficiency that we are administering our government, including in our HR department. At the most recent staffing report around the Department of Workplace and Employment Standards, where we just hired a director, they talked about how long it took to get the classification approved and to get things posted and to get applications in and to conduct interviews, that it's a slow process. I think part of that is the technology that we're using. Part of that is, I think, again, needing to even staff up departments like HR who are in charge of hiring and onboarding. But we also have done recent things like removing Things like cannabis testing for city employees, which should have been removed a long time ago since we're a cannabis-friendly city. But having some of those barriers to even the qualifications for people to work. We need to have open city job fairs and again, meet people where they're at. We know there's many job training sites. I work with a union where there's constantly folks coming in asking for jobs or job assistance. I work with the Bay Area Black Workers Center, Economic Justice for Black Oakland. There's so many groups that are working on jobs policies and assistance and have asked for the city to ensure that they are hiring residents, that they are opening up these positions. And again, years ago, being at rallies at City Hall, asking that they simply fill the vacancies. Again, these are not unbudgeted positions. We have the funding for them. They are simply vacant because we have not gone through the actual steps to hire people. So it's about getting enough staff to conduct the hiring and onboarding, and then keeping that efficiency and effectiveness going in how we maintain our staff, how we replace people when they leave. If we know we have a large chunk of folks that are going to be aging out and retiring, then ensuring that we have HR specialists and people who know how to lead these departments and do their jobs at a high level to make sure we're bringing them in and recruiting them and recruiting from our city. So I think it all goes back to, again, overall, not adequately staffing any of our departments, including HR, and that's crippling hiring overall.
Well, thank you very much. And before I turn it back, there's a few more questions that came in, but we're going to go ahead and compile these for you and your team and get them over to you, and we'll get them out to our community. But I just want to thank you personally. It's been great to hear your perspective and your unique experience, as a candidate. So thank you very much. In Georgia, I will pass it back to you.
All right, well, and then I'm just going to pass it back to our moderator in a way to close out here, or our president. I just want to thank everybody for supporting this effort to really get our candidates in front of our membership and our community so that we can really understand their heart. We can understand what they really believe in and how they believe they can make change. On the behalf of ARPB, we want to just thank you for the support. Get the word out. We should have many more people on here than this. Please spread the word. And